This originally appeared in the Quarterly Conversation more than 6 years ago. I'm recording it now on September the 30th, 2012. I think it still holds up. How can we read in an age of images? Any blogger with a lit blog knows that the amount of traffic you can expect pales compared to that of people who have image-based sites. For example, I recently came across an image-based site called The Sartorialist. It's based on a grabby idea, just a series of snapshots of people who are well dressed with commentary underneath. And when I looked at the number of hits the site had received, I blanched with envy. Even more heavily visited, of course, are the big-name sites with enough corporate dough behind them to generate high-octane buzz, or the porn sites. Sometimes it's easy to confuse the two, but I digress. In any case, the question of the power of the image, the great seduction of looking, is one that lit bloggers have to wrestle with. Some dispense with images altogether. Some use them tastefully. Neither approach is better than the other, since it's important to remember lit blogging is time-consuming and almost always a labor of love. No point criticizing blogs for not doing things they're not intended to. But here's the thing. Lit blogging, like literature itself, is currently caught in a death struggle with the powerful draw of the what can be seen. Simply put, images pull readers away from pure text. Yet the hypnotic power of what is visible, and in particular where males are concerned, what is visible and sexually arousing, is not often dealt with in literature. At least not enough, considering the stakes involved. That is, the survival of literary fiction. There is, of course, an enormous amount of writing about desire. Portnoy's Complaint remains for me not just an extremely good example of literary writing, but also an example of what the autobiographical novel might have become if it had been allowed to merge more closely with stand-up, a development that would have been a good thing in my opinion. And once you get started on the question of writing about desire, it's not so much a question of where to start, but where to stop. Other examples that immediately come to mind because they capture something of desire's ability to electrify and humiliate a person in rapid succession are Jim Harrison's A Good Day to Die, William T. Vollmann's Butterfly Stories, Russell Smith's How Insensitive, Mary Gaitskell's Bad Behavior, David Plant's The Catholic, and Elizabeth McNeil's Literature by a Hair, 9.5 Weeks. But there's not much literary writing about the complex relationship that exists between the sexually arousing image and lived desire, at least not much that I'm aware of. I'm open to suggestions. One piece that I came across from was an article in a magazine. I can't remember the author, can't even remember the magazine. But in it he commented that looking was such a source of bliss torture for him that he wished he were blind. In his case, he wasn't talking about images per se, he was talking about all that he saw. And this illustrates the complexity of the topic, since, of course, the works cited above all do deal with the scene. But they don't deal with the interrelationship between what we see in the world and what we see on the page, screen. And then there are plenty of characters in books who have porn fixations, but they tend to be limned over rather quickly as if sure we all know what they're doing is totally empty and pathetic. They tend to be portrayed as hooked on porn because it is the sole source of contact with the opposite sex that they have. But leaving aside the fact that almost all men at some point in their lives go through a period when they are obsessed with the images that pornography has, and I'm including all variations of it with this term, including the gentle softcore, sometimes called erotica. The capacity to look at imagery that is sexually exciting has become such a cornerstone of contemporary culture, it is almost like a sea upon which we float. And while it is true that pornography is, largely speaking, erotic culture for males, there are other forms of visual imagery geared specifically to women that excite. In fact, the pleasure we get from looking is a lot more complex than first seems to be the case, and there is a widespread hypocrisy in our culture about the fact that almost all of us, to some degree, are now addicted to what academics refer to as the gaze. By the way, and just for the record, I find a large amount of porn distasteful, especially when one reads the accompanying text that usually reveals the man who made it to be some sort of sociopath. But there are the images that are beautiful, and they have a pull.